Hello, economics students. We're going to continue our discussion of supply today, and we're going to focus on supply changes. And I want to start off our presentation with the question, when does supply change? And the answer to that is when there is a change in the amount supplied at every price. The supply line must shift to the left or to the right. So here we have three supply lines, S1, S2, and S3. So remember, supply is the entire line. Movement on the supply line is not a change in supply. For supply to change, the entire line must move or shift. And here in this case, if we go from supply line number 1, S1, to supply line number 2, S2, that represents a decrease in supply. And in this case, the supply line has shifted, as you can see, to the left. So when supply decreases, the line shifts or moves to the left. And in the case of S3, the line has shifted to the right, right here. We have an arrow pointing to the right. That would represent an increase in supply. The entire supply line has shifted to the right. Supply has increased it. Okay, now important to remember, when you graph changes to supply and demand, you're going to use arrows showing the direction of the shift, and always use arrows that are pointing to the left or to the right, not up or down. Okay, so up and down, like you see on the left, is incorrect. If you look at that line, that arrow, that kind of would imply that the supply line has increased. But in fact, that's a left shift going from S1 to S2. That would be a decrease in supply. Okay, so make sure you remember that in order to correctly show the decrease in supply over here, I would add a line shifting to the left. Okay, that's wrong on the left. This is correct. Okay, so the line has shifted to the left, representing a decrease in supply. Don't forget that. That's very, very important. So, graphing supply then, here we have again, supply line has shifted from S1 to S2. Now, let's make sure we understand why this movement, this shift to the left, is in fact a decrease in supply. So, with S1, our original supply line, if we were to charge $5 for the product, we would supply 200 units of this item. However, if we supply at $5 and now we can only supply 100 units at $5, that is a decrease in supply. We're supplying fewer items at the same price. And even though if you were to draw an arrow, it would be pointing up, in fact, that would be misleading. This is a decrease in supply. Again, that's why we want to have our arrows pointing to the left or to the right, not pointing up or down. With supply, that gets very confusing. With demand, it was less of an issue, but it's definitely an issue with supply. Make sure you have those arrows pointing in the right direction. Okay, so what causes a change in supply? Just as with demand, there are certain things that cause, about 4 or 5 situations that can cause demand to change, similar to supply. So for example, if there's a change in the cost of production, that would cause supply to change. If the cost of production goes down, people will supply more. If the cost of production goes up, people will supply less. So what can cause a change in the cost of production? The cost of resources. So oil has been fluctuating a lot lately. So anything that's made out of oil, recently the cost of production has, it's just changed a lot for various reasons. Therefore, the supply is being impacted quite a bit as the price of oil at the pump changes, as the price of oil extraction at the ground changes. We went very quickly from oil costing something in the neighborhood of $30 per gallon up to about $130 per gallon, per barrel. Taxes and subsidies are a cost of production. So if we should raise the taxes on items, taxes are paid for by the producers, that will cause an increase in the cost of production. An increase in taxes, a decrease in taxes lowers their cost of production. So again, a higher cost of production, a higher tax would reduce supply. Technology and efficiency. As we get more efficient with the use of technology, that tends to lower the cost of production. So if you look at the picture on the right, we have some robots building automobiles. Well, you know what? Robots are a cheaper production tool than human beings. That's why people are automating production and putting in robotics where they can. It lowers the cost of production, enabling the, in this case, automobile manufacturers to produce more automobiles. And substitute production. If we can easily use the production facilities for one thing and convert them to producing something else, that will make it easy to change the supply. So, you know, production facilities that make a soccer ball could easily be converted to produce a basketball. So that will make it easier to increase the production of basketballs should we desire. That can cause a change in supply, being able to shift production resources from one product to another. Okay, so we were just discussing, you know, changes in production costs. What causes a change in supply? Well, a change in the number of producers will also cause a change in supply. So, Perrier water. When I was a kid, there was one supplier of bottled water. It was Perrier. Now, of course, we have all kinds of numbers of suppliers of bottled water. We have a whole lot more bottled water supplied to the market today than we had when I was a kid, because there's a whole lot more producers of bottled water. A change in producer expectations. This is kind of an odd picture to show here, but there's a reason I showed this picture. Back in, I don't know, about 5 or 10 years ago, probably about 10 years ago, there was a bad drought in the Midwest. And the corn crop, the alfalfa, barley, all those things that are used as cattle feed, the crops really diminished significantly due to the drought. That made it so that it was anticipated that grain prices were going to go way up. So how did the producers of beef cattle respond? Rather than wait for the grain prices to go way up to feed their cattle, they went ahead and slaughtered their cattle early to put that cattle on the market before the expected increase in the price of grain hit them. So the price of the grain did not hit them yet necessarily. They started killing the cattle before the grain prices increased, but they had the expectation that the price of grain was going to go up. So rather than wait for that expectation to become reality, they put out a whole lot more beef on the market early. The supply of beef increased significantly during that drought because of the expectation that the cost of production for steaks and hamburgers was about to go up. Okay, unplanned events can also cause a change in supply, and we've certainly seen this recently. Natural disasters would be an example of an unplanned event. COVID, I suppose you could call a natural disaster. As a result of COVID, a lot of corporations had to shut down. They couldn't get a workforce in there because they were all sick or afraid that they were going to get sick. We're still living with the impact of COVID in supply today. COVID really disrupted supply chains. So that's a natural disaster. Other natural disasters like hurricanes or tornadoes can also impact supply. A drought can impact supply. Natural disasters, an unplanned event. What other kind of unplanned events are there? Well, acts of war or terrorism, man-made unplanned events. Okay, so if you have a war going on, that will impact supply. Again, as I make this video in 2022, there's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. Russia attacked Ukraine. Ukraine is a major producer of grain, one of the largest producers of grain in the world. Guess what? As a result of the attack on the Ukraine, the production of grain has plummeted in Ukraine. Even the grain that has been able to get produced, they're finding it almost impossible to get that grain to market. So the act of war has really impacted the supply of grain. And by the way, as a result, we pay a whole lot more for bread and any other item that requires grain today. Cereal, everything has gone up in price significantly due to the lower supply caused by that war. The picture I have here on your screen was taken over Kuwait back in the early 1990s when Iraq under Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait. The United States military pushed the the Iraqi army out of Kuwait. But as the Iraqi army retreated, Kuwait, of course, is a major oil producer. The Iraqi army basically put explosives down into every well they passed and set those wells on fire. And here you see the result. It was a huge ecological disaster as all those wells were burning, and it's very, very difficult, I might add, to put out an oil well fire. It can take a month or more to put out those fires. And as you can imagine, the price of gasoline at the pump ultimately went way up because of a reduced supply of gasoline due to lower production of crude oil out of Kuwait. So that's it for this presentation on changes to supply. I would just stress once again to remember that when supply changes, it's not movement on the line, it is an entirely new line. That's always important to remember. And now I would like you to go to Canvas, because I'm pretty sure you'll see an assignment in Canvas for you to complete on supply. Have a great day.